What is one thing that the younger generation believes that is bullshit? Story 1. I teach 7th graders. Most of them think that they will be making $200K per year. They can't even read at grade level. Many of them think they will make it big on YouTube. Answer: you probably read about the Empower survey earlier this year, where they asked different generational bands what annual income they think it takes to feel financially successful. People from their late 30s to retirement age all volunteered 75K, 80K, maybe a little more if they lived in big cities. The average answer from Gen Zers: $585,000 per year. That is worse than being unrealistic. It is total economic illiteracy. Story 2. That punctuation and grammar doesn't matter. Basic literacy. The lack of writing skills is appalling. I was once called a bigot for saying that people can and will make judgments about your intelligence and take you less seriously for bad writing. Answer: lapses in basic grammar on an application document are not acceptable. I could totally overlook a mistyped spelling, see what I did there, in an email, but if you submit a typed, written CV with a misspelling, you're going to the bottom of the pile. It's literally the most flagrant sign of a lack of attention to detail. In kind, if your name is Tim, I am completely aware that it's not your fault, but I also know you're probably a fudge idiot because your parents are idiots. Story 3. According to our kids, they don't believe my wife and I when we used to say texting was 10 a message, and we had so many minutes we could use on our phone. Story 4. That presenting your life on social media matters. It doesn't. It only creates a feedback loop of vanity and frustration. Being a private person is so much easier than having to deal with attention. I only use Reddit, and that's also just because forums don't really exist anymore. Answer: I only post really dumb things on Facebook about my dogs or fun little things I'm doing. No drama, no vague booking, just funny little things that will make me smile when they come back around in memories. Story 5. That their boundaries are other people's responsibility. It is their responsibility to maintain their boundaries and mental health, not everyone else's. Story 6. A dude in his early 20s just told me that he collects old movie tapes. I asked him if he meant VHS, and he said, no, I mean what they had before DVDs. I asked if he means what you put into a VCR, but he had no idea what that was, and said, no, I have a tape player. Apparently videotapes are really collectible, but nobody's ever heard of VHS. I didn't have the heart to ask if he knows the difference between Super 8 and Standard 8. Answer: yep, I'm a millennial, 1994, who grew up with VHS tapes and cassette music tapes. I have been collecting them since around 2010, and now I'm being priced out of those two hobbies by people who weren't even alive at the time. Thrift store Walkmans? Nope, probably won't find those anymore. The fact some of them don't even know the terms VHS and VCR really adds insult to injury. These were two of my dirt cheap hobbies before. Now I'm afraid to listen to my copy of Metallica's Ride the Lightning, because last I looked, it was worth like $35. I paid like $1 for it. I can't wait till the hype beasts go away. I don't so much mind the new people who are actually knowledgeable and passionate about it, though. Story 7. That everything has to be labeled. Enjoying a tidy house isn't OCD. Having a song stuck in your head isn't ADHD. Preferring to be in your own company isn't autism. Your parents getting frustrated because you won't tidy your room isn't abuse. Feeling sad for a couple of days isn't depression. Preferring texting over calling isn't anxiety. Your friend that happens to be gay doesn't need to be known as your gay friend at all times. Answer: someone described that we basically swung from one extreme to another. Past generations more or less bottled everything up, refused to diagnose problems, and had this suck-it-up mentality, while the current generation is trigger-happy, throwing around all the terms for everything, and thinking every action event can and should be labeled as such, e.g. trauma, abuse, neurodivergence, gaslighting, etc. When the pendulum changes directions, it goes hard from one side to the other till it can find the center. Edit, grammar. Story 8. That all struggle is bad. Some struggle is good for you and helps you grow as a person. It also makes you a more interesting person. There is such a thing as too much, though. But making their life too easy is not doing them any favors. It's setting them up for failure as adults. On a related note, Google locus of control if you're interested in learning why some people are able to see the effects of their actions and others are not. Story 9. That Anne Frank didn't exist, and Helen Keller was a fraud hoax. Straight from my college-age Gen Z niece. She saw it on TikTok, don't you know? Story 10. As a teacher, sadly, a good portion of my students think education is bullshit. I can't exactly disagree in terms of public, but many of them feel failed by school. Story 11, that Helen Keller really didn't exist or that she really didn't have an exceptional life while also being blind and deaf. I've come across a lot of kids that believe this or that she was faking it, which boggles the mind. Story 12, that they somehow have this wealth of information and brain power that no previous generations had. Anyone under the age of 45 has had access to the internet and unlimited information since they were in high school. If you want to talk about boomers, yes, but if you think you are somehow intuitively smarter than your millennial uncle, you'd be wrong. The arrogance of some younger people I've worked with is off the charts, to the point I can't even teach them what they need to know, and then they fail and complain they aren't getting promoted. Answer, I'm a millennial construction foreman. I'm not one to rant about kids these days. There is a lot of positives about the younger generation. But yes, being extremely sensitive to direction correction and then shocked when they fail and irritated for not getting a raise is a hallmark of the younger tradespeople. There's many other positives though, and I think they bring a good work-life balance to the industry. Story 13. It's better to get forgiveness than permission. They also DGAF about the word no. They think it's just the other person trying to manipulate you. Story 14. Some of them seem to believe in the myth that colonialism, gender roles, slavery, and greed are intrinsic to Europeans alone and were absent everywhere else until Europeans influenced them. Story 15. That the niche groups they interact with online are reflective of real life, or that the values and social political norms of the communities they interact with online is or should be how the world operates. It's easy to spend a lot of time online and come away thinking that everyone is a socially stunted, mentally ill, chronically online person who needs 24 HR's notice and 3 hours of aftercare in order to receive any form of criticism or have their ideas challenged, but then you go to work or to the store and realize the most folks are just folks. Story 16. Using AI makes them smarter. It's like saying having your girlfriend do your homework makes you smarter. Story 17. I taught journalism as an adjunct. I had students complain that I didn't give them trigger warnings on the syllabus or warn them ahead of time if I switched up the lesson plans for breaking news. One student insisted that the final project was too triggering, not mentioning it at any time during the semester, as certain assignments built up to it, and wrote a whiny email to the department head when I failed them. Story 18. Many, but no means all, of my college students believe that an opinion can't be wrong. If something is one's opinion, they reason, then it can't be true or untrue. It simply is. It's straight out of idiocracy. Answer. Honestly, that is certainly a present-day thing. I recently had a conversation with someone, and they insisted I used a word incorrectly. So I looked it up and tried to show them the result. They refused, said that they knew the answer and that we had different opinions. Sure, different opinions, except yours is wrong. Don't use an opinion as a way to remain ignorant. Seek truth. Seek understanding. There is reality. It's not totally defined by opinion. A rhino is a rhino, not an African unicorn. That's cute, but it's not real, and it isn't an opinion. Story 19. That every bad thing that happens to them is because of someone else, and not their bad decisions and or inaction. Story 20. That everything is cooked. I'm so sick of this phrase and this nihilistic cynicism infecting everything, especially online. Yes, things in the US are very, very fudge up right now, but checking out is not going to fix anything. Get involved. That everything needs to be hyper-specifically defined to a ludicrous degree. Not every action or behavior or belief needs its own special designation. That people aren't allowed to make mistakes. I think a lot of this has to do with how much younger people's lives are online and how much of their activities are self-recorded and photographed. That being said, mistakes are a part of growth. One misstep or misspoken word requires someone to be canceled and their lives burned to the ground. There's a huge difference between someone being bigoted and pathological versus someone making a one-off mistake. Answer. I had a younger employee, and on multiple occasions I had to talk her out of quitting. Why was she quitting? Because she thought I was going to fire her. Why did she think I was going to fire her? Because she made a mistake. She was absolutely exhausting with how much mental maintenance she consumed. Not to humble brag, but at my work, I'm considered a pretty easy person to work for. Add to that half of my positions are considered developmental. So I'm constantly upskilling people so they can work in other parts of the company. Teaching is in my job title. I got to the point where every time I needed to do a teach and train, I had to start with, I'm not here to fire you. She got an offer for a different job and asked us to match it. We wished her good luck. 10 months later, she asked my boss if she could come back. Fastest hell no I have ever sent. Story 21. That they invented intimacy, as the old saying goes, It's true though. Every new generation thinks they've discovered or invented all the naughty things, all the rebellious things, all the smart ideas about how to fix the world, all the evils. Even political discourse is swayed by it. The notion that a current leader is the worst thing ever because they have no idea how many monsters came right before. This tendency used to be a normal, healthy part of child development. That final stage where they enter the big world and think they know how it works and then discover that they don't, and undergo that final humbling and vital lesson for adulthood. But then we changed the balance of things. We allowed cynical corporate entities to amplify the youthful voice, to tell it that it was inventive and unique and special, that it had indeed invented intimacy, and that insert brand was ready to provide them with everything they needed to express all those wonderful, new things they discovered or created, or amplify their voice. Because surely the most important thing was that they be heard rather than learning to listen. We've now had multiple generations of young people who were never sufficiently humbled by the reality of the world, but have nevertheless been absolutely besieged by it, fighting a battle they don't even know they're fighting, and thus doomed to lose over and over, trapped in the endlessly repeating present, because it's impossible to hold on to what you have and prevent things from sliding backwards when you never actually knew what you had. Answer: the worst part, they are having less intimacy and adult content-informed intimacy, while the previous 4 generations have had more intimacy, produced children from it, and simply enjoyed on a one-one basis while adult content expectations while being average, ugly people worldwide. Like no one let their facial measurements stop them. They did not go for the girl that was good enough for them. They didn't think they ranked an adult content star. They knew they were average and average would have to do. And they live despite not being cute or pretty or thin. People worldwide have and do just live and enjoy intimate time together. And it doesn't make them special or superhero or the magic man or give them money when they go through the learning process of being intimacy active either. Story 22. That millennials are cringy, but somehow they're not. No, they are also cringy. We're just less self-conscious about it. Over time, you just generally give fewer shoot of other people's opinions. Story 23. Resilience. So many young people seem to think if something makes them uncomfortable, they get a pass on having to do it. But being uncomfortable is a huge part of life. Public speaking in school is uncomfortable. Job interviews are uncomfortable. Being with certain family members is uncomfortable. Making small talk is uncomfortable. But these are just things we have to do to get along in life. You have to do them, and they're generally not going to harm you in any lasting way. Sometimes you do the uncomfortable thing because it's what's expected of you as a person in society. Treating everything as a huge fudge crisis you won't recover from really cuts you off from a lot of actual living. I blame the pandemic. A lot of these kids were stuck in a house for 2 years, and they really missed out on normal social interactions at a pivotal time in their lives. IDK how they can build these skills except just doing the thing, but a lot of them have an aversion to ever being uncomfortable. I base this on interactions I've had with friends' kids who just can seem to get it together and instead isolate themselves to avoid any negative situation. Story 24. That education and hard work don't significantly increase your chances of success. Somewhere along the line, people got it in their head that success was promised. It never was and never will be, but good choices make success possible. Answer: it is true to say that education and hard work are no guarantee of success for many reasons, not least of which is the difficulty of defining success. But it is almost universally true that hard work and responsible education will result in substantially better outcomes than not doing these things, outside of outliers which do happen. Borrowing $150K for college when you could spend $30K on state schools does not count in my book. Story 25. That AI is right and good and useful. It's destructive, and there's a reason every evil megacorp has adopted it so readily. Story 26. Lots of young people use made-up mental health conditions and disorders as excuses to not take personal responsibility. Story 27. Same thing I did. That I live in an invincible country that rules the world, and nothing bad is allowed to happen to me. I obviously was very wrong. Story 28. TikTok is a trustworthy source of unbiased news that shows the facts the mainstream media refuses to publish. Story 29. Experiencing any sort of discomfort is not okay. I.e., if you're tired at work, if you don't feel like doing something, then just don't do it. BC self-care, etc. It's not weird to just breath into the phone when someone calls and expecting the caller to say hi first because they are the ones who wanted to talk. Other commenters already noted this. but the insistence of everything and everyone needing a label or diagnosis. The idea that everyone is a victim and there is zero sense of agency ever. Age gaps are automatically grooming. No matter what, the constant need to find any whispers of social injustice, that all they have to do is get a degree and they will automatically get a six-figure job, that they won't have to learn people skills to do well in most careers, prob others that I'm missing. Story 30. A lot of these comments hit on the same root issue. Younger people are growing up in a world where appearance gets rewarded more than substance. Social media and influencer culture tell them money is quick, fame is attainable, and labels explain everything. But when you strip it down, most of it is smoke and mirrors. Believing you'll make 200K on YouTube, or that clout value, or that every quirk is a diagnosis. It's all different versions of the same illusion, that life skips the grind. Reality eventually comes crashing in, and that crash feels harsher when your expectations were built on bullshit. Every generation has its delusions, but this one is amplified by algorithms that profit off attention. The dangerous part isn't just believing lies about money or mental health. It's when people start believing lies about history itself. That's how you end up with kids saying Helen Keller was fake or Anne Frank didn't exist, because some TikTok video packaged ignorance in a funny or viral way. At the end of the day, the bullshit isn't just the beliefs, it's the system that rewards believing them. Story 31. That they don't need to do the time, they should jump straight to the top of the food chain just because they graduated. Story 32. I live in a college town. That you don't need to look both ways before crossing the street on a crosswalk. There's always been a rumor that if you're hit on the college campus, your tuition is paid. It's not true, and it can be the pedestrian's fault if you don't look and cross the street into an oncoming car. Yes, even in a crosswalk in this town. Story 33. That it's impossible to meet people without dating apps. Yes, you have to leave your house to do it, but if you go out into the world, it's still full of other people. Quit trying to order a girlfriend on the internet. Answer. I think part of this perception is a dearth of social activities nowadays compared to before the internet. A lot of the social places and activities that were so prevalent a few decades ago are more scarce or now non-existent. Even something as simple as biking has gotten more complicated as some cities are starting to restrict biking for adults to only particular streets and routes and banning them everywhere else. Story 34. People aren't constantly thinking about you. Just focus on your goals in life and stop worrying what someone may think, because most of the time they aren't. Story 35. Younger generations really think they can skip the whole getting a job part and just become influencers overnight. Good luck with that plan. Story 36. One big thing a lot of younger people believe, but many argue is bullshit, is the idea that you can become instantly successful or rich just by going viral once. Social media has made it seem like fame, money, and influence can come overnight. But in reality, most people who make it online either worked for years behind the scenes, already had resources or connections, or only stay relevant for a very short time before fading out. The belief that a single viral TikTok, YouTube video, or Instagram reel is enough to secure lifelong success is what many older and even experienced younger people would call unrealistic or plain bullshit. Story 37. That we need the internet. There is actually a world outside the internet. You can turn your back on the entire internet and live a great life. Story 38. Cancel culture. I'm a huge fan of accountability, don't get me wrong, but also I am old enough to have seen people make very fundamental changes over time. Hold folks accountable, but before you drag up a 30-year-old interview, look at what they've done and said in the meantime. Nuance is a word because we have a need for that concept. Story 39. That being different means you're neurodivergent. Used to be that people could just be weird. Now if you're different, you're obviously A to autistic, and if you haven't been diagnosed, that's just because all the doctors are wrong. Story 40. That anyone older than them is a boomer. I'm a secondary school or high school teacher, and my students occasionally say, "Okay, boomer." I was born in 1993. I don't think they even understand where "okay, boomer" came from. Story 41. That feet are inherently intimacy or private. The next kiddo that mentions anything about dogs being out is getting a timeout. Story 42. All my life, I grew up with the Russian villains on TV and laughed at old people talking about the warmongering communists. I was thinking the world had changed and there were better protections and a global economy that would stop that sort of stuff. Boy, was I wrong. Story 43. That they will be able to get a high-paying job off the bat, expecting promotions and pay rises after being in a role for 6 months. Also that criticism is bullying. that they know what they are doing better than more experienced and senior employees, or even employees. Story 44. As I get older, I've come to appreciate that not everything which is true can be proven, and not everything you think has been proven is true. Story 45. That the algorithm is working for you and not whatever corporate overlord owns it. If the algorithm was actually tracking my internet history and trying to give me things I want, my results should be way more gay. Like, how many times do I have to Google queer space opera before someone tries to sell me a queer space opera? No, I don't want to read Nicholas Sparks. Stop showing me ads for his books. Or I happen to discuss kneading yogurt in front of smart devices, and I get 10,000 ads for dairy yogurt. Like, well, come on, you've got 10 years of credit card history, and you still can't work out that I'm allergic to milk? The algorithm, and now AI, is shoot at knowing what you actually want or need. Story 46. That gatekeeping is bad. Wrong. Gatekeeping is the only reason anything good even exists for a little while. The past had gatekeeping too, except we had the integrity to call it having standards. It was a good thing, and it needs to return. Not everyone deserves a seat at every single table just because they showed up. Story 47. That your feelings mean anything outside of your protected space. When life gets hard, don't expect others to just cater to your needs. Story 48. That we oppose their suggestions because we're afraid to try something new. The truth is that in most cases, the ideas were tried and failed. Story 49. That politicians, any politician, gives a shoot about us. People seem to think they have to be one team or the other. Neither team is for us. Story 50. Finding a job that you love. All work sucks. If work was fun, they wouldn't have to pay you to do it. Get a job that pays well, and then happiness will follow when you get to retire early. Story 51. That each generation thinks they have it worse than any other. Every generation has challenges. They will differ, but we all work our jerk off. Story 52. Looking presentable in terms of dressing and how they express themselves around people. They don't give a FGK, they are don't cares. Story 53. Gender roles. We went from advocating for co-op sports and equal pay to following women in bathrooms, demanding genital checks, girl dinner, I'm just a girl boy, and 10-year-olds having a 21-step skincare routines and wearing halter tops. More young boys believe women don't deserve equal pay or job opportunities than a few years ago. Girls are aspiring to be trad wives and OnlyFans content creators. And overall, none of these kids are learning and are just parroting harmful ideologies. Story 54. That having at least half a dozen ads on every webpage is a normal and fine way to use the internet. Story 55. That going out for 100 dinner, 50 drinks, 25 lunches, a few grand to visit friends for the week multiple times a week doesn't impact one's ability to do what you want financially. Story 56. That apostrophes are just a garnish that you can sprinkle around willy-nilly as and when you feel like it. Story 57. Being a millennial and having a deep distaste for all the takes that were coddled or want everything handed to us, I have noticed that community work led by people from our generation has significant room for improvement. A lot of millennials do seem to believe that communities just manifest out of the shared interests. Without a need for people to organize and structure, I can only speak about the queer community in Germany, so there's a lot of qualifiers there. But most queer spaces here are still very schwulen a gay culture, which is distinctly different from queer culture, at least in my opinion. One reason is that Just Noon is stepping up. Locations, spaces, and events remain organized and in possession of activists that were part of the activism movement in the 80s. And the way they're organized, is set up, and even decorated very much reflects this. Answer. Good point and a very good example. This applies to even older generations to some extent, but it gets worse with time. Nobody wants to do any community work, even if it's in their own best interest. Best example I can think of is our workplace having a high budget to spend on a party that everyone is waiting for. But nobody wants to be part of the planning commit. Without a commit, the party will be very basic and everyone is annoyed, but still no volunteers. It's almost ridiculous. People are so afraid of doing a little extra or being taken advantage of that they opt out of a lot of things without even knowing what it's about. And I do understand not everybody has time or interest to everything, but everyone cannot always be the free rider. A lot of hobby groups such as kids' dance recitals or literature groups need to have at least some people doing a little extra hours if we want these to happen at all. Nobody, very few people, wants to pay a salary of a person to do those things. People just want it to happen dynamically by itself without themselves involved nor paying for it. I'm sorry for the rant, but I've seen very many communities die because of lack of volunteers. Story 58. They falsely believe in their own hype. like we're Gen Z and all that crap and think they're so different. For as long as humanity has existed, there was always a new generation. Story 59. The idea of endure at work for 40 years and then enjoy retirement. Young people are like, no thanks. I'd rather burn out in 5 and rethink life. Story 60. That the no child left behind ideology will follow them into the workforce. If you are not meeting the benchmarks of the job, you will be fired. Story 61. Anti-work. Look, I feel you. There is societal imbalance between haves and have-nots, and a lot of the haves are exploiting the working person. But if you are going to rebel against the system, you still need to work at something. Organize and splinter off into something else. Even hippie communes have a general contribute or please leave bare minimum expectation. I've seen people on those groups, and some have a realistic outlook and simply want change in the inequities of the workplace. But there is a significant majority presence of entitled people that believe that if they resist enough, everything will be handed to them. They aren't there because of contemporary problems, but simply use the narrative to enable a lazy lifestyle. Answer. I know a few people IRL who are regulars in that subreddit, and they have the exact kind of arrested development you would expect. One of those individuals is almost 40 and meaning about being rejected from corporate life, all over anti-work. She's the one who got aggressive neck tattoos and sought a career in the trades, so I have no idea what she's complaining about. Story 62. The funniest thing here is everyone's complaining about how the new generation believes the internet is an accurate representation of the real world, and they proceed to complain about the stereotypes you find only on the internet. Story 63. I misread this post and thought it said, what is one thing that the younger generation believes is bullshit? That would have been an interesting question. This is just another stupid karma farming post for people to act like they know what other people think. I.e., why did people vote for Trump? Story 64. That trying your best entitles you to the results you want. This isn't unique to current young people. It's a hard lesson every generation will have to learn. Story 65. That our parents had no means to contact us, we couldn't be tracked. Our lives weren't posted on everything. So we got up to all sorts of mischief that they couldn't even imagine. And anything they think is bad pales in comparison. Story 66. That becoming a YouTuber making lots of money is a completely reasonable job option. Honestly, it's as viable as becoming an actor or singer. The people we see on YouTube are the ones who made it. We're not seeing all the people with 3 followers making videos after work. Story 67. That hard work doesn't matter, that they can get rich quick, that they are super special. Hard work won't make you a billionaire, but if you never have anything you want to work for, then what a dull life you must lead. Also, no one is super special. We just give artificial value to people who have looks or money. You can lose those. Know what you can't lose is easy? Values and inner worth. Man, the internet really fudged this generation up. And so did parents not watching them. I've been teaching 8 years, and it has taken a nosedive since COVID. Story 68. So far, I haven't read a single thing that's exclusive to the current younger generation. I was born in 1996, and my generation did all of the same goddamn things you guys are complaining about. Did you guys just, not notice when your peers did this stuff? Story 69. That selfishness or being self-involved under the title of self-care is a legitimate excuse for being disrespectful and or cruel to others. Ghosting someone who you ultimately didn't like on a dating app isn't self-care. Blocking someone after you tell them you're not into them if they react badly is. Putting your own wants and needs above all others at all times isn't self-care. It's self-indulgence. It's absolutely fine to take time to yourself and prioritize well-being, but I see so many young people who treat other people badly because even a second of personal discomfort is completely intolerable, cruelty, and detrimental to their well-being. Story 70. That respecting boundaries seems to mean complete and total avoidance of anything that causes discomfort, often to the point where having an uncomfortable conversation about how someone's doing is rude. That challenging someone who's avoiding something is completely impermissible. And it's not the age-old avoidance. It's explicit acknowledgement of an issue, then deliberate avoidance in spite of that. There's no resilience in that attitude, just complete avoidance. As a consumer of a lot of media and stories with a variety of themes, when discussing them, it can be really frustrating to see so much faux concern that amounts to avoiding a topic entirely. Slacktivism at its finest. Story 71. That they'll make it as YouTubers, influencers, etc. Sorry, but like acting or comedy, you gotta be good at it. You need an aptitude. That the internet is virtual reality. Look, there's meat space and virtual space. That's it. Both are reality and both have consequences. Story 72. thinking that because they're able to spot some fake material, they can spot it all. That doesn't apply to any generation, really. We all have our blind spots, and disinformation is being produced for all customer segments, so to say. Story 73. One thing that a lot of younger people seem to believe that could be considered bullshit depending on your perspective is the idea that success and happiness comes solely from being constantly productive or hustling. There is this massive hustle culture that's prevalent on social media where it's glamorized to always be working, always grinding and turning every passion into a side hustle. It's often linked to the idea that if you're not grinding 247, you're lazy or failing at life. But the reality is this kind of mindset can lead to burnout, stress, and mental health struggles. Success isn't just about how much you work, it's about balance, knowing when to rest, and understanding that there is value in downtime. Not every moment needs to be optimized or turned into a productivity machine. Story 74. My niece thinks she's the best fisher. We have identical poles, and while she's oblivious playing with worms, whichever pole gets a hit, I hand it to her and say, "You got another one." She's really let her success go to her head, but I'll let her keep telling her mom how much I suck, because when the whole family's at the lake, I'm going to obliterate her self-esteem in front of everyone. Story 75. That they are the first have any experience. My 19-year-old cousin says this all the time. She had to work 2 jobs while in 12th grade. Her generation has so much schoolwork, and having to work and do this and that is difficult. Everything is online, so it's harder, and it was easier back then because we didn't have as much internet requirements. I tell her all the time, 1, you didn't have to work 2 jobs. You just wanted to live a boogie life to keep up with the girls on IG. You wanted a 900 custom prom gown instead of a 201 JCP. You want to get your hair done every 3 weeks instead of learning to do it yourself. You want to buy $250 shoes to match that one shirt you ordered online and go with absolutely nothing else you own instead of buying a simple black and white pair to match everything. And back then, early to mid-2000s, we have internet in school, but it was not used too much. If we had our phones out, it got taken away while you guys make TikToks with your teachers. You can ask that math app to solve a word problem step by step while we had to actually do it because that app didn't exist. If you miss class, all your work is posted online, you can do it at home. If I was out sick, I have to hope someone took good notes or hope I can catch up myself because once that board was erased, that's it up. Story 76. That texting IMs and social media constitute legitimate human interaction. In reality, they're not interacting with other people. They're just interacting with a device. There's no substitute for sharing the same space with someone and dialoguing with them directly. Story 77. Multiple people have told me that young guys nowadays generally don't eat private area because it's gross. Listen, dudes, female body part have never been less gross. It's one of the best ways to please your partner and also to not be a selfish jerk. I just hope that they aren't expecting blowjobs. Story 78. That they don't get a say in politics, or that they can safely ignore politics. Both attitudes are gravely problematic. Story 79. The younger the generation, the better they are at identifying societal problem, but the worse they are at realizing that while most societal problems are impossible to solve without societal effort, the impact of those problems on a person's life can be greatly reduced by that person's actions. I see a lot of young people not taking action because the problem is greater than themselves. Example 1, there is a loneliness problem with Gen Z. It's a well-documented problem. It doesn't stop you personally to take steps toward fixing that in your life. Join and create a community around something you like, approach new people, etc. Example 2, there is a big emotional crisis with young men having basically no emotional support system. It's a hard thing to fix as a society, but nothing is stopping you from calling the homie you felt withdrawing lately. Now, I'm not saying older generation are doing more of those actions. They're still stuck at identifying the problems mostly. It's just baffling to me how good young people are at identifying issues, but entirely give up on fixing it even in their personal life. Don't stop trying to improve your lived experience and the one of your loved ones. Story 80, that they're wiser and smarter than the people who came before them. In fairness, the people who came before them also believed they were wiser and smarter than those who came before them, and those who came after them. Both are also bullshit. Story 81, that becoming a rich streamer on Twitch or YouTube is going to be easy street and can make fun of PPL with important, real jobs while they laugh and play video games all day. Story 82, that AI art is fine. You see a bunch of kids watching YouTube clips like that. As a digital artist, it hurts, man. Story 83, that they have some sort of mental trauma or social anxiety that they need meds for and that they can use as an excuse to get of doing things. Story 84, that they have no agency over their own personalities. They literally blame everything they do or don't do on outside influences. It's good to be able to recognize what can impact your mood or actions, but they take a second step of equating it with a complete inability to change. I didn't do my homework because my teacher put too much pressure on me, and the pressure caused stress, and I can't work under stress. The cause is the teacher. The student is merely a vehicle for unchangeable cause and effect. Meanwhile, a previous generation might say, I got stressed and I didn't finish my homework, to which the next step would be, I should get better at working through my stress. Source, I'm in my mid-20s and supervise a lot of interns at work. We're technically the same generation, but I was raised by boomers. Boomers get a lot wrong, but I gotta say, they're right about a couple things, and one of them is personal responsibility. These kids are useless. Story 85. I've noticed that they're weirdly Puritan. Intimacy work must be made illegal, kinks mental disorders, BDSM is always abusive, and any portrayal of intimacy relationships is fetishizing. Aside from the fact that a lot of these people aren't even old enough to be able to hold any valid opinions on such topics, it's genuinely disturbing how many younger folks feel entitled to strangers' bedrooms. Even compared to homophobic boomers. Story 86. That anyone who has a political opinion that in any way differs from their own is stupid, a fascist, racist, communist, transphobic, insert any applicable slur or simplified label. It doesn't exactly make for a healthy democratic society when people refuse to hear and respect the validity of various perspectives and opinions. Story 87. I don't think anyone really believes that, though. I think a good exercise is making YouTube video with your kids so they can see what actually goes into it and understand the impact between acting and video editing. Story 88. That power dynamics exclusively determine who's right and who's wrong in a given situation. Sometimes the bad person can be the one with less power. Sometimes the victim has more power. Sometimes the power dynamic has no bearing. Story 89. The idea that dating apps work and they aren't trying to milk you for your money. I started using 2 apps like Sitch, event-style dating, and Circuit dating, getting magged with friends of friends. And they are much better, but still, everything is jerk. Story 90. That being alone is okay and you don't owe anybody anything. For such a health-conscious generation, they seem to ignore what loneliness does to your health. Everyone will need family and friends during their life. Most things aren't cringe or awkward. Don't be defeated by not trying before you start. That the things you lived through in your life, the previous generations before you who are still alive also lived through them, and it affected them also. In many cases, those things affected them even more. Story 91. That most of their new cool shoot, fashion, slang, etc., is just recycled from past generations. That's valid for every younger generation. Story 92. That the world has never been so chaotic or bad. Statistically, a much smaller percentage of humans are dying from disease, injury, or meeting violent ends than throughout history. It's just you used to only see that bad stuff happening in your village or city, and now you have devices that show you the bad stuff happening all over the country world. Climate change is the one exception. Things have never been worse in that regard, and I totally understand the doom that kids these days feel about it. The adults who are able to vote or influence climate change need to do better. Story 93. That there's going to be a livable planet for our grandkids because someone somewhere will actually do something about climate change. Story 94. That some insert person here exposed video or document is true. Story 95. That it's not necessary to do anything with your hands. My neighborhood kids do know how to use a rake or shovel, aside from a few young entrepreneurs who shovel snow. They have no manual skills in drawing or cooking or using hand tools. It's as if they've abdicated the physical world because virtual is enough. I feel like a medieval craftsperson. Story 96. When the pandemic first started, I was talking to 2 other coworkers, one in her 30s like myself, and a fresh graduate, 22 years old. Us 2 millennials were talking about the parallels we were seeing with the pandemic and Y2K, hoarding, conspiracy theories, end times panic. Our younger coworker was like, wait, the Y2K stuff really happened? He, of course, knew about Y2K, but assumed the panic and hoarding he'd seen in older TV shows, movies, and stories was played up a lot. We both laughed and got on YouTube to show him news clips from the late 90s and how the panic was very real for a lot of people. Story 97. That the ability to navigate anywhere virtual, physics, or social spaces without assistance or AI is not necessary. Story 98. That getting a haircut that makes you look like a mushroom or broccoli is in any conceivable way a good look. Sideburns. Get 'em. Story 99. Best I can tell, somewhere along the way, we as a society stopped teaching children that life isn't fair. Never has been, and it's never going to be. In an odd way, it's equal opportunity to be a raging meanie to everyone is the only fairness we get in this deal we call life. Story 100. Some of the younger people I work with are convinced low-paying jobs are temporary, and they believe they'll hit it big soon. It's like they think they're temporarily embarrassed billionaires who just have to do one or two things right before they have more money than they'll ever need. Story 101. That plain text needs filler text or emoticons. I dislike when websites, instead of loading, they create some lorem ipsum kind of bullshit. Bonus points if it makes the site app crash. Or when you get a respond from a bank and the talk like, Story 102, that they can all get a job they love, which will pay great without studying in school. I want to go into the medical field, and I'm studying to get good grades, so I'll be accepted. No, Charlie, you will not go to Harvard and study law if you can't even do simple math. Story 103. I feel like a lot of kids these days think it's super easy to get lucky and end up being a multimillionaire celebrity. Story 104. That adults know what they're doing all the time. Like, my dude, I'm just as confused as you are. I'm not an adult. I'm a child with a drinking permit. Give me a break.